The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but women rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat about all. We're at the edge with prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost to ignition and liftoff.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Monday, July 24th, Tuesday, July 25th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day, morning, and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the blue-skied mountains of central British Columbia. The forest fire is almost over. Thank goodness. We are here 7 days a week, broadcasting right from my home again. You have no idea how emotional and excited I am to be back in the SOR headquarters here. Oh, I could barely breathe. I'm so excited to be back on. Let's welcome in everyone listening in on our terrestrial stations. WQEE 99, Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. If you like our music, get your horns up for the guitar god himself, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official music of SOR. Hey, if you're on social media, give us a follow on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on iHeartRadio in the United States, RadioGuide.fm, Player.fm, TalkStream Live, and Stitcher. Of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. And if you go to patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of SOR as well. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you have to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on the UPRN chat room, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, or the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook. Or if you're on Twitter, just use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. As of right now, you can go to our store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, stickers, Paracon tickets. We're going to be adding more to that very, very soon. We have the Encounter Online that deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editors Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You can check out my latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. We welcome in UFO seekers Tim Doyle and his partner Tracy. They're sitting live listening at Edwards Air Force Base right now in California. UFO seekers, our number one group for seeking UFOs. ET Contact is one of my favorite topics on this show. You all know that. As an experiencer myself, it's always intriguing to compare stories and experiences with those who deal with contactees and abductees on a regular basis. Since we're in North America, we often forget that this phenomenon is worldwide. The ET Newsroom is what we get to chat about tonight. Founded by Joanne Summerscales, fellow Canadian, even though she's lost her accent, Joanne has had a long-term interest in those experiences. The subjects, which are still treated by society at large as being on the outer edges and still very much unacknowledged as anything meaningful, and usually ridiculed by the mainstream, is why she feels it's important to get some sort of database/news outlet going for the experiencers. These areas include alien abduction and contact, the history of humanity and genetics, ancient origins, alternative energy systems, health and illness management, and the extensive area of ufological, including exopolitical topics as well. We bring in former Canadian, but always Canadian, Joanne Summerscales from the United Kingdom. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio for your first time. How are you?
Well, what a wonderful introduction. I'm really well, and I do apologize for the lack of Canadian accent, and I wouldn't want to try one. Well, but I love it.
How long have you lived across the seas? Because we got to try and get you back here. You're one of us.
You know what? I've only been back about 3 times, and it's the most gorgeous country with the most wonderful people. So I really do need to get back and spend some time there. It would be great to come over and do a tour, some kind of linking in with all you guys over there. Maybe that's something we could look at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's my parents, who were English, worked over there. And had several of us kids over there. So we became Canadian citizens. And luckily for me, I have dual nationality, which is just as well because I was challenged at the border on my very first holiday at 18 years old when I came back from France with a boyfriend, and they were going to deport me back to Canada. I said, "You can't, I'm going to college in September." And I didn't have a British passport, so I had to toot sweet, get my act together, because they gave me 3 months to prove that I had been in, such was the case, that I had British parents and I was indeed a British citizen. So my life nearly changed. I was nearly deported back, but I had no family back there.
We would have taken you. We would have taken you.
I've knocked on your door. Hello.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do have to say, I'm kind of excited about tonight for two reasons. And I know you're probably unfamiliar with this, Joanne, but I had been evacuated from my house for 16 days. And due to forest fires here in central British Columbia.
Oh, my goodness.
And they lifted the evacuation as of Saturday around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had driven the 5 hours down to the coast to see my parents, Mrs. SOR, my son, and, get some shopping done. Didn't know when it was going to happen. So after the show on Friday, I actually drove down to the coast, got about 2 hours sleep, went for a haircut, fell asleep in the barber's chair as she was massaging my head, woke up, went back to my parents, went out to get some shopping for some food done, find out that, of course, the evacuation order had been lifted. So at 4:40 on Saturday afternoon, I drove back home, which I took the quicker route because it was now open. And I'll tell you, the devastation of forest fires is terrible. And, certain areas look like a nuclear wasteland. But but I'm so thankful to be home, and I'm very excited to be sitting in my little studio here at SOR headquarters. My fridge and my freezer survived, so I didn't have to replace either of them. The only thing, my house didn't smell like campfire, which I cannot believe, considering the fire was literally surrounded my whole area. So I'm pretty excited. Extraterrestrials, and I'm broadcasting my first show back at home with you. I'm very excited about having you here.
Well, congratulations on being back home. And can I just ask just about the fires? Because
Sure.
I know there's been some incredible fires around Portugal as well. And some people are attributing the unusual amount of fires to the chemtrailing, which is leaving aluminium and other minerals, on the land, of course, and on the trees, causing a much more combustible material. I don't know if that's, something that has been talked about or thought about.
That topic actually did come up, so I'm glad you brought that up. We maybe get one chemtrail a month here. We are so thinly populated up here that like when I lived near Vancouver, it was chemtrail city. Come up here, we get maybe one a month.
Doesn't that tell you a lot?
Well, it does, but the forest fires here actually started back on, let me look at my calendar here, July 6th. And coincidentally, that was my 2-year anniversary of moving up here from the coast and starting my daytime job that day. And I can tell you that in an area in behind the city mills, there was an impromptu campsite that wasn't supposed to be there. Apparently a person lit a campfire and it quickly took off, and within 2 hours of the report coming in that the forest fire was there, they were already calling in water bombers.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So it is very, very impressive that we have the Canadian military here helping out, the RCMP. My house was not looted like a few others in the area by the scumbags who want to take advantage of people being away. Unfortunately, there were 2 houses. We drove by them yesterday. There were 2 houses a couple miles away from us in our area, which is called 108 Mile Ranch. They burned down. The 105 area, which is just south of us, had about 15 to 20 houses lost. And literally the fire crept up right along the highway. And yeah, it was pretty emotional being out of my house for the last 15, 16 days, but I'm very, very glad to be home and getting back to some comfortability. I'm getting a question in Twitter from Rahonda at #SpacedOutRadio. No, it's not raining. It is sunny and warm, and there was a little bit of a flare-up in our area today, but nothing the firefighters couldn't handle, and everything is looking just spectacular. It was beautiful waking up today and not seeing any smoke in the sky whatsoever. Beautiful thing.
My goodness, what an ordeal.
Yes. Have you ever been through something like that?
No, I haven't at all. And in the UK, we don't. We're not known for that either.
It's always raining there.
We've had. No, I was just going to say we've had flooding, but it's not always raining here. Well, unless you're in Wales or Ireland.
Yes.
I won't pay for that, but no.
Well, you know what? This was my first time going through something like this, and I can tell you it changes you profoundly. And I'm sure there's a few members of my audience who are probably like, oh, come on, move on from this. But this is the first real traumatic thing that I have had happen where it put me and my family in danger. And I'm glad, knock on wood, no pun intended, but I'm hopeful that we've seen the end of this, but there are some serious changes coming around the old cabin here to make sure that we're better prepared for the next time. Well,
hopefully that won't be for a very long time if at all, but
I hope
goodness,
so.
I mean, it's that awareness, isn't it, as well, of enjoying nature, just not realizing how dangerous it can be, and how fast things can spread. That's the part I think that is so challenging as well. And then the aftermath, goodness.
Absolutely. And a good friend of ours of this show, Mark Spender, he is in our Spreaker chat room. He was evacuated with us as well. He went more south than I did. But I know I think lost his freezer and his fridge, and if that's the worst thing that happened, that's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. But anyways, we brought you on to talk about a little bit of alien contact. Let's learn, besides being Canadian, who Joanne Summerscales is. How did you get invested in the ET newsroom?
Well, there was no kind of aha moment. It seems to be a gradual, opening and an awareness. From a pretty young age, I was very interested in things paranormal, spiritual, human development, human being. I trained as a therapist in my 20s, and which was to do with, now you would give it the title or include it in quantum field healing, including regression work, because it deals with the points of inception of the issue, and lots of other energy work deals with that also now. Things like your EFT and all manner of areas like that. So that took me on a gradual journey through to the ever expanding field. And as I developed and friends accrued, they were interested in this subject. And one of my best friends had a great friend of hers who was Sixto Paz Wells, the American Peruvian, contactee. And I met him, interviewed him a few times. And, I was also very skeptical. And I thought, gosh, here's a man who's completely balanced, completely sane, really kind, wonderful individual. And here he is, having had all these amazing experiences since he was 17. And I don't know if your listeners may have heard of him or not, but at 17 he had some channeled, if you like, automatic writing kind of scenario going on during a meditation with his mum and sister, and basically saying, we want to meet you. We're going to see you in the in the Chilka Desert, at this time. And my name's Oxalk, and we're from one of the moons of Jupiter, Ganymede. And when he went on this trip to see them with some friends, he got so terrified when they showed up in their ships that they all legged it. When they all settled down, they said, okay, we don't want to have this contact with you in fear. We want you to have some, connection so we can really share what's going on. And basically, it was very much a spiritual soul development teaching that was going on there. There was nothing of abduction. There was nothing of any trauma apart from the initial shock that, yes, this is real. And he did get over that. And he became the guy who could call down the sources. And I have a photograph in my collection. I can't remember if I put it on Facebook or not, but it is of it's an image that looks like a light bulb hanging over Lake Toca, which is one of the biggest lakes in Colombia. I think I've got the name right of the lake. And that was from like the 90s, 80s or 90s, I can't remember now. And so he does these trips now with people, and mostly people have experiences where they show up. But he was involved with the mission, or creating Mission Rama, which is to do with love, again, spreading awareness of harmony on the planet. So that was a very interesting orientation of, ET experience. And then as I looked into the subject more and more, I found that there were lots of people who didn't have such benign contact, seemingly, and had much more challenging contacts. And with my therapeutic interest and also general health awareness, I became very interested in the impact of these encounters on humanity and on our consciousness, and then, sort of polarized down into individual cases. And so it took a long time. It wasn't until 2011 I actually started the AMASH project. And the AMASH, and ETN has superseded that, but AMASH stands for, it's an anagram for Anomalous Mind Management, Abductee, Contactee Helpline, because I also provide a dedicated number in the UK, a mobile number that anybody can call or text if, they want to speak to somebody and just express their issue or have some support. It's really what it was about. So during that time, I hooked up with someone who was able to film, and, we did one-to-one interviews with experiencers, as we now know, is a generic title for that group of people generally, including contactees as well as abductees, and really presenting the human experience story. It wasn't so much about, although I consider myself a researcher as well, it was really, I was deeply interested in the deeply impacting story and where that took people, how it changed them, what that did to the global consciousness, because this means something. And, if we don't talk to these folks, you folks, at the coalface of this experience thing, of this interaction, then we aren't going to progress. It's happening for a reason. And we need to become, more aware and interactive with that. So that's what I'm really interested in it. And I had, since starting AMASH, I personally had what I would call a lot of, I'm going to just use the phrase psychic attacks, and you can call them interdimensional attacks, you can call them whatever you like, but these were challenges to me in an altered state to put me off the trail, if you like, and to try and scare the bejesus out of me. And they kind of were effective to a degree, but they didn't stop me doing anything. It just kind of made me work a bit harder on my, I'll call it protection, firming up my energy field, so I wasn't so subject to those kind of events. Now, in 2013, a major TV company over in the UK ended up producing a documentary, I'll call it a mockumentary, about AMASH, and made sure that the world thought that, experiences were a bit kooky, not to be believed, and all that kind of thing. So that was a massive learning curve. Now, people may say, well, that's awfully naive of you to even go down that route. Well, but I was pitched by a couple of ladies from a production company who were wonderful, and I still believe that they are, and they were definitely assuring me of the integrity of the project, but they were also newbies to the field. They didn't know anything about this field, so they were open to it. But when they got their first major distribution deal with a company called Channel 4 over here, anything and everything was to do with the integrity of the project was removed from their purview, and Channel 4 took it and, as I said, made sure that it wasn't anything to be taken seriously, and that, and it was it was just dreadful. However, having said that, quite a lot of people contacted me, over 300, in absolute support, saying, oh my goodness, thank you for being the one to put your head above the parapet. I guess that's not how you wanted things to pan out. Of course not. But in the meantime, the internet trolls and the trolls generally had a field day and made sure I'd got a bloody nose and all the rest of them. It was a baptism of fire. But very interesting, that when this subject does put its head above the parapet in any kind of serious way, boy, does everybody come round to shoot you down. Oh, my goodness. That was an absolute eye-opener. And so I've survived the attacks, the interdimensional attacks, and so far the others. And then in end of 2015, sorry, my brain's a little bit foggy, still in the early hours, Amash had suffered a lot of attacks on the website. It had backdoor porn going on, which it wasn't, you couldn't see it from the front end, but my webmaster said, oh my God, Joanne, you have to shut this down right now because this is polluting the ethers. And just goes to show you what's more important to people. The porn was gathering a massive amount of interest. He showed me the kind of listings, and I wasn't seeing any pictures, thank God, but it was just this stream of input, and behind which were all the nasty stuff. So I just said, pull it right now, and that's that. And at the same time, I had my own radio show, and I stopped that at the time to regroup. I had my own radio show, which I called the Amash Files, with People's Internet Radio, which I did for over a year. And so that, when I took a breather and started ETN, and I'm really still regrouping, to be honest. I wanted to give ETN a little bit more of a wider remit, so it encompassed a little bit more than the experiencer. It was some of the more out there research, and I'll just cite dowsing as part of that, which is not, that's an ancient thing in itself, but I'm working with a group of people over here, and as far as I'm aware, it's groundbreaking work on detecting ET in ancient archaeology, artifacts, and that kind of thing, which we can get into at another time. So I'm looking at developing a series of written works called the Dowsing Detectives, which will document my involvement with these guys and what they found, because it is just, kind of blows your socks off. And that really does boggle the brain. So anyway, so the ET newsroom has superseded Amash, as I said, and the remit will still be the same. I will be doing interviews and they'll be put up there eventually. I haven't done any for quite a little while, but apart from my own, with your good self. So it's been quite a journey.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been interesting to see how certain bodies or powers that be unseen don't really want this stuff out there. They don't mind this, they don't care about this, but in any serious way, mainstream, no thank you. So I think go on, sorry.
Sorry, so when you started looking into ET abductees, was this something that had affected you since childhood or people you know, or was this something that you just felt compelled to do because you heard so many stories?
I think the latter, though I'd spent a few years in what's called a psychic development circle, and it's not because I go down that route specifically, but it was just an opportunity offered at the time, and I thought I would go through that door because of my therapy training. I was very interested to see and observe how this worked with people. So it is this developmental thing. As I said, there wasn't any aha moment, but it was this developing passionate. I really am passionate about also the well-being of experiences generally as a body. I mean, because what people don't realize, and I'm sure you do, is that these run into millions. This isn't, the odd 10 or 15 people or the odd 1,000 or hundreds of thousands. This is millions across the globe, as far as I can tell from some of the polls that have been done. And, when you speak to people, I mean, they reckon now, like at least a quarter of the planet has had interaction. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a bit more. So it seemed to me that there was a massive chunk of stuff going on for humanity that was not being addressed. I mean, we've had lots of books and, there are some fantastic researchers and stuff out there, but still, it's like as if we're all under this ceiling, and I'm interested in kind of punching through this ceiling of, the giggle factor and, I don't know about you, Dave, but I've come across people who have lost everything because they have talked about what's happened to them in the abduction scenario.
Absolutely. I have a friend of mine, Joanne, who actually lost his best friend of 35 years because he told him he found a Sasquatch print.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the guy literally called him back like 30 minutes later and said, "Stay away from me and my family." 35 years. I lost my best friend of 28 years who basically said that he called me sick and that I needed to get help because of everything that I had experienced. I mean, these are long-term relationships forged by people who you're supposed to trust, be able to tell these stories to. And it's funny, it's the ones who you think you could tell these stories to who are the ones who are reacting the harshest.
And isn't that an interesting indicator of the abject fear in which this subject at some level in those people is held? Because that's a fear response. And, really, if you start analyzing, well, what is it about that? What is it of the unknown? I spoke to a guy recently who was now very gung-ho about his experiences. And but for 10 years he'd been in terror of it, and the initial thing that had happened to him was a very close-up sighting of a craft. This is in the UK, and I said, well, whatever made you? What was the fear? What was the terror? Why were you? What was that? He said, because I then knew it was real, and I thought, oh, okay. You see, I've always known it was real. No one told me. No one needed to. I just know it. I just feel it with every fibre of my being. And also it's completely logical. It's illogical for it not to be real. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that this stuff is not real. Now, listen, I'm not saying that every person who comes forward with a story is not a chance or a hoax or whatever. But I'm telling you, people have said to me, you must have had loads of hoax calls. Actually, I haven't. I can count on, over the years, 2 hands, and I won't fill those 2 hands up either with the people who've hoaxed. And the hoaxers are people who have had too much to drink often, who go, yay, I've been probed by an alien. You say, yeah, okay, good luck with that then. And, such things, but, the ridiculous. And it's you instantly know. But the people who that are real, they're very cautious, they're very scared of your response. I'm a stranger to them. They've already been beaten up emotionally by responses from other people, or they are in fear of that. And they nearly always preface their call with, you're going to think I'm crazy. I say, well, I'd like to. Okay, try me. Let's see if I can do because as of yet, I have heard some wild stuff, but I have not heard anything that makes me think they are crazy. And people say, well, what about the mental health issue? I said, well, what about it? I said, and if somebody does have mental health issues, does that mean that an experience they may have is not real? You know, is that what we're saying here? No, I don't go with that either. Of course you need to take things into consideration, and humanity is what it is. It's not about being a Pollyanna about it. It's about trying to use, as many of the discernment tools as we can. And, obviously there's the backdrop of your own beingness and your wider knowledge and research that is in the field to start with. So it is absolutely shocking. I have spoken to quite a few people who, like you, Dave, have lost not only their best buddies, they've lost their family, they've lost their businesses, they've lost their jobs. And to me, this is absolutely mind-boggling. That response alone says everything to me about, how mind-managed, how mind-controlled the planet is. Because, I've just to give you a kind of a case in point about the generality, and this is a general observation of most people who generally aren't interested in this subject. And Bill Brooks is a guy I've written a book with. I co-authored it last year after quite an arduous, nearly 3.5, 4 years work with him. He was a guy who came to me in about 2012, and he'd had a series of heart attacks and strokes. He was only in his early 60s then. He's not an old guy, born in 1950. And he said that he'd had what he called a download. Well, perhaps I call it a download, an event where it was a bit like a near-death experience where at the age of 44, he saw his entire life play out before him, including events that he didn't believe in, didn't have any time for, and had thought that people who had gone through such things were complete fruitcakes. And these experiences were of abduction, alien abduction, and contact as well. And these had been going on since he was 2 or 3. And this guy was he was a rootin' tootin', red-blooded male. He was born at a time when they were still recovering from the war. This is in the West Midlands. So, rations in England were still going on until 54. So, bless him, he grew up in really quite, you could say, extreme poverty. I mean, but everybody was poor, so they didn't mark that out as anything special, but that was the case. And he didn't have any education. I think he zipped into school maybe when he was 5 or 6 for a few months, and same when he was 13. So he couldn't read or write at all. So that's the kind of person he was. He was a nature boy. He spent most of his time in fields and woods, so he was very tuned in to all of that, which is, I think, probably why he survived what he survived. But the point I was making is that this guy, he had a very disabled, severely disabled brother who was not mentally disabled at all. But when Bill, who went into the army at 18, came out 6 years later, his brother, with whom he shared a bedroom when they were kids at one point, was desperate to try and get him to understand what he had witnessed, seeing his brother being abducted as a kid. And he would be getting books out of the library, he'd be drawing images, and his brother, Bill, would think that whatever physical ailment, was there had reached his brain and that he was completely cuckoo. And that completely wrecked their relationship, so much so that on his deathbed, 6 months before Bill had his download, sadly, he accused Bill of being part of it all. And this guy, his brother, had severe internal organ issues and had accused him of, being involved with the guys, the ET lot, who were responsible for part of his disability. Bill had not a clue what he was talking about. And when the download happened, he saw that event with his brother. He saw everything, and he saw something which so shocked him that it sent him into almost a nervous breakdown, a tailspin for 2 or 3 years, where he hit the bottle. He, did everything to try and get these memories out of his head, because he could not kind of assimilate them easily. And this download, and when you think about it, here's this guy, he's 67 now, 2/3 of his life he had lived unconscious of a massive series of events and experiences that he was absolutely locked out to, so totally mind controlled. It's a very, very interesting case, which is why I spent the time, because Bill's also dyslexic like many, quite a few experiences as well. So words aren't his first thing. After the army, he became a professional musician. He excellent voice, and eventually spent his life around the clubs and pubs of Wales and the UK, plying his trade. But after that awareness, after that massive, for want of a better term, NDE or download, whatever you want to call it, because look, we don't have any framework for this stuff. We're creating it now as we're going along. You are the forgers of the new human, the new awareness, because although this has been going on for a long time, probably millennia, I would say, in our modern era, the last 100 years and certainly the last 50 years, and polarizing down, it's still, very hot. And in the circles where it is okay to speak about it, there's quite a community now grown up through exopolitics, through all kinds of stuff, a lot of great stuff going on in all kinds of different countries, but it's still all under the radar. Although I was told by some folks over in the States that actually the UK probably is one of the places that mention it most in some of our newspapers. And there is a guy in the Daily Express called John Austin who puts up quite a lot of stuff and about all of this sort of stuff. But it's still not taken seriously. Do you know, I even had my 2014 conference, which was my last one, I even had a guy called Matthew Dalton from the Wall Street Journal come over. And he was a financial guy, reporter, and he was based in Brussels, and he said he was going to come over for the conference. I said, what? I said, why? I said, is it silly season for the Wall Street Journal? I said, well, how come a financial reporter is coming over? Anyway, what was interesting, I was just mentioning this again last night, actually, to someone. I said, it's interesting that the Wall Street Journal edition was never published. His review or whatever was never published in the UK. It was published in the US, and it was on the online version for a short time. I managed to get a screenshot of that. But, and he gave it the usual treatment, the sort of wry smile, and the slightly distance, I'm not really part of this, I just came along for a giggle kind of thing. But anyway, look, hey, he came, but I just think it's fascinating that, these people cannot take this subject or give it any kind of seriousness unless it's a personal experience. And this seems to be the key factor. Like Bill, who is a prime, shining example of the closed-mindedness as he was of, many people to this subject. And he honestly believed that people like you and I were completely cuckoo until he had his own mind-bending experience, which did bend it right out of shape into something else. And it's extraordinary. I can't quite begin to imagine what this must do to your inner being and then the outer expression of it. I mean, for Bill, what's happened to him, he said, who knows why he was triggered to recall. And we can talk about some of the events he's had, because he's had a few firsts, in my opinion, unless somebody can tell me otherwise. He, at 10 years old, he was lying down in a wheat field, and noticed these spheres. And I'll talk about the story in a minute, actually. But the first was that he's the only person I know to actually be in a crop circle as it was formed whilst they were in the crop. He's the only person I know to have seen an actual animal being abducted just before he was. He didn't know what he was seeing at the time, but he knows now. And he's the only person to have been taken at gunpoint by a human and told to go into the light. This is on a military base, and we can talk about those incidents separately. But he was also subjected to a kind of we call it an MK-esque, MK Ultra-esque kind of event in the UK in Porton Down, which back being 68, which back then became infamous in the future times for having experimented on service personnel, obviously without consent. And there have been some cases in the UK where there has been compensation made, so we know it was true. So anyway, there's lots of weird pieces to a big puzzle in Bill's case. And the fact that he contacted me because he nearly died, and he just wanted to be heard. He wanted to have a voice. And that's another reason that I started AMASH, ETN, was to give people a voice, to give them a safe platform. And by safe, I mean unjudgmental. I'm not going to rip them to pieces. I'm not saying I won't ask questions. I'm not saying I won't, really get them to think about things. That's different. But it is not with the view to completely, killing them on air or, making them look fools, nothing like that. There's far too much of that going on, in my opinion. And, when we come back with a bit more compassion, kindness and humour and bring our intelligence to bear through those doorways, then I think we'll things will be better.
Joanne, have you ever found any patterns in the experiencers that you talk to and deal with? And the reason why I'm asking, and this is totally unscientific, but one of the things I've noticed about this show is we seem to have a lot more negative experiences coming from our American friends than we do with our Canadian friends, even though there's negative experiences north of the border as well. Have you noticed patterns like that, maybe country to country, in what you have studied?
That is interesting. And, and it is, we use the word negative, and I might replace it with challenging, because I'm just going to quickly polarize it back to Bill, and then I'll come back to the wider issue. Because what happened to Bill after the download, and after he sort of regrouped himself and acclimatized himself to the new him, was that he was different again. He became instantly a person who had, it's like a gnosis going on. He had awareness not only of, for example, and this is instantly after this happened, he knew that the government knew all about this stuff, and he knew that the pharmaceutical industry was also something, that needed research and flagging up in terms of its control of humanity through meds and goodness knows whatever else. And he said, when I first came out of all this, I began researching the pharmaceutical industry, not the UFO world, because actually he was rejected by a lot of the ufological world, because at that time, and his download was around 94, people were still not, although there were abductees and people had, we know Whitley Strieber and all the rest of that, but still they were not really on the radar as kosher people to it wasn't a field that people really were comfortable with still. So he still had a very hard time. But he said it opened me up in ways. He said, now, I don't even believe in war. I don't believe in all that I'd been part of. He said that it changed him and his psychology so drastically. It was as if he had suddenly woken up to a high grade and upgraded him, who had awareness of things of a higher nature that he could never have learned at school or in a classroom or with anybody, telling him over a pint. These were DNA, expressed, that it was as if it was in the very fibre of his being. So, and going back to the negative, generally, well, there are a lot of very challenging experiences that people are having. And then also, if you follow those people through their lifetimes, often you'll find a turnaround where they begin to feel that there is an incredible awareness and awakening to so much, because, it's a little bit like the guy I was citing earlier who, had this sighting and was terrified for a long time because he then knew they were real. Once he had, once all that had calmed down over a period of time, he began researching, and it has the overall effect is of expanding the consciousness, and that can only be a good thing. Now, why it has to be through trauma, through this backdoor methodology where our consciousness is in another dimension sometimes, or maybe, certainly not, maybe it's 3D, here we are right now happening, as it also happens to many people, but it seems to be this interdimensional thing going on, and we are slow to cotton on and to understand it, because so much of our lives are controlled by the powers that be, our governments. We all know how they do it, through ridicule and all the rest of it, and death is a good one. So UFO researchers people have been killed and known to jump out of buildings and that kind of thing. I'm thinking of Forrestal and those kind of people, the Roswell stuff, and it's a challenge. So the powers that be and therefore those who run the media have made sure that nothing really gets too far out there. And internet radio is one of the most wonderful things because it gives you a chance. And whether it be you're preaching to the converted or chatting to the converted, who knows? But at least there's a voice, and that's really important. But there are a lot of people with very positive experiences, but I don't tend to hear from those guys too much because they're already okay with things. I tend to hear from the people who find it a real challenge. And look, who wouldn't? It's a big shock. Where's our education in this? Who has told us that, who shows us as kids growing up in our art class or school, the medieval pictures with UFOs in them, which nobody talks about, and only researchers, have realised and found and brought to the public attention, and and also from further beyond earlier in the medieval times, the Crusades and stuff like that. The 1168, the wood carving from Nuremberg showing a battle in the sky. I mean, God, this has been going on forever, this contact. And we've got cave paintings, showing clearly, as far as I'm concerned anyway, space beings and craft. It's this isn't news, but it's it's just that it's as if it's been kept behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz, and the little man behind there is still keeping that curtain closed, but it is opening bit by bit. And because humanity, because of the shock factor that humans we go through, it takes a long while to recover. So that's why one of the things I think that we're both doing here, Dave, is by speaking about it, it gives people permission in a way to accept not only their own experiences, but that this is a reality. And when you're at the grassroots level, what I mean by that is, I'm talking about the person next door. It could be them, it could be me, it could be you who's having these experiences, and how that impacts. The fact that you've lost people, other people have lost, tons more as well, and that is a real shock, because you go through bereavement, you go through a whole another adjustment, and it changes your worldview, and that is something, and we have to look at what that does to us. So the challenging, the negative, it's normally we go to a doctor or a psychologist or psychiatrist when we've got issues that trouble us mentally, but we know all too well that, most of us do anyway, that if you go to a psychiatrist with anything like this, that you are going to be then maneuvered into the psychiatric program, which is medication generally, and that will keep you dumbed down even further and keep you from wanting to speak about these events, and they will definitely steer you to the point that you are, not free to speak about this, and that, you know, you're possibly not well. And that label, you know, is a massive stigma in our society, mental health issues and that kind of thing. And if you don't, you know, and if you do go down that route, I've got a person, I still haven't put their interview out, and I may not, because they're quite vulnerable. They do have some mental health conditions, but they've also been through the ET issue, and they said they went through the psychiatric doorway, and they said had they had anybody like myself or maybe you to speak to, they would not have felt that that was their only option. And because of that, they are medication dependent still to this day, and lead, I would call it, less than a full life, because the medication has an impact and side effects and all the rest of that. So, you know, this is serious stuff.
Joanna, I'm going to cut you off right there, because we are literally about 20 seconds here from going to break, and I don't want you to continue on and get cut off and all of a sudden me having to be rude, you know, because that whole intro music thing comes on, and that's just not nice when that happens. Joanne Summerscales is our guest. I want to give you her website because I think you should check it out. It's really cool. It's called theetnewsroom.com. Very simple. theetnewsroom.com. A lot of good information on there if you're an experiencer, if you're into the paranormal, if you're into dimensional beings, interdimensional, whatever it may be. We will be back after our first break, right after this on Spaced Out Radio. Coming September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon. Hi, this is Dave Scott. The event will be held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Come join us for an amazing weekend of speakers talking all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Sasquatch, intuitiveness. Listen to great speakers like Miriam Delicato, Samantha Mowat, and the crypto guru Ronald Murphy. Get your VIP passes by going to spacedoutradio.com and clicking on the Paracon banner. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up, enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Lori Williams is going to join us. We're going to get into remote viewing. It's going to be a great show tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We are also live on Revolution Radio and KTLK, and if you're listening in on the Double R Machine, remember it is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Mendacious. Mendacious is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can be like John and use hashtag SpacedOutRadio to connect with me live during the show as well. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can also listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TuneIn, iTunes, and our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can also head out to our store, pick up some SOR swag. It's good stuff. I picked it out myself. It's very good. You want to get some of that. And you can read up on the encounter online, our news section, and so much more. SpacedOutRadio.com, our website. Tonight, we are talking ET Contact, abduction, and so much more with Joanne Summerscales. Her website, theetnewsroom.com. Joanne, welcome back.
Lovely to have. Thank you very much for having me on, I was going to say.
Well,
and I just wanted to apologize if my brain is a bit foggy, because although I did get a few Zs before I came on, I'm kind of still there.
No, I fully understand and fully agree. So if you could continue on. Right before the break, you were talking about an experiencer named Bill and some of the extraordinary experiences you've had with him.
Okay, well, I haven't had so many with him, but he has had them. And just getting this information down, because working with Bill, and I've noticed other experiences, it's as if rather than having a linear awareness, it's as if it's a starburst of information, and my job was to bring it down, hone it down, and polarize it so we could have it in a form which everybody could hear and understand and now read. And we published it last year. It's a self-publish out on Amazon and Kindle, and just for people, in case they've never heard of it, it's called 44, because of the age when he had this download, and it's called Based On, and I'll come to that in a second, on an ex-soldier's true story of lifelong encounters involving alien abduction, men in black, a serial killer, and persecution by the Freemasons. Now, when we came very near to publishing, Bill got a bit nervous because he has had a hell of a life, and he's had a lot of persecution issues from those folks mentioned and others, and whether it's because of his background, whether that has stimulated things, we don't know. So we put Based On because he felt that he had a little bit of wiggle room, that if anybody really challenged him, he could say, well, it's based on. But in fact, I can tell you that what is between these covers is absolutely true. And as he said, if it's not because I'm lying, it's because that's what I honestly remember. And I have, really teased every detail out of him that I can, because his story boggled my mind. And I've heard some mind-boggling stories generally. And it was extraordinary because of, just to recap on the stories I mentioned, the events that happened to him, because I just think it's fascinating. So he's had events since he was 2, we now know. And imagine you're 44 years plus, and you haven't a clue. You think that this whole scenario is crazy, and you won't even speak to anybody like me, myself, or Dave, because that's how locked out you are. And then you have an event which tells you otherwise, and you have to face it. And when he was, and these memories I'm going to speak of now, he was locked out to until the age of 44. So when he was 10 years old, he was the little man of the house because of his brother's disability and their poor, their poor income. His mother was always at the hospital with his brother. He had a little sister who he would take to school. He didn't go to school himself. He would look after the house, make food, and his dad would be away working. So, as I said, he was a bit of a nature boy. And on this particular occasion, so this would be 1960, possibly 59, if you think of it in the context of the era, this is also very interesting. Because he would go down to this area, and I've done a field trip with Bill and been to these major locations where he's had these events, And I went to this specific place as well that I'm about to tell you about. And it was a crop then. It's now down to grass and dog walkers go there, and it's by a canal. But this area was later crop, and let's say it was corn. We don't. He thinks it was corn. And it's 10 years old. What he would do is lie down in the grass, make himself a little bed, not heeding at all the admonishments from his father, who would tell him about the combine harvester that was going to come and mow him over, and he'd be no more. But boys being boys. So he made himself a little bed, and on this one occasion he noticed these two large spheres. One came along first, and he said they were probably, as he remembers, about 8 foot across, so really quite large, and they were just kind of spinning, not too far above him either, within 10, 20 feet, I think, something like that. And as one came, so another came, and then they began spinning around one another, and he thought, wow, that's strange. He just thought they were massive balloons. And because at that time what the kids used to do was fill a balloon and write on it and send them off hoping they'd get to France, and maybe somebody in France would find their balloon and write to them, something like that. It was a little game. He thought that they were just massive balloons. Anyway, he stood up as they zipped off to get a better view, only to find himself in a massive crop circle. Of course, we didn't call them crop circles then, and we didn't really know what they were, but we certainly know in hindsight that's exactly what it was. And as he stood up and these things had zipped out of sight, what he saw was in the field along the way, which was still within his view, there was some kind of craft. And coming toward him were a party of 4 people. And he took it to be a family group, mum, dad, and 2 kids. And when they reached him, he was a very open kid. He didn't really question things. And maybe kids don't, 9 or 10 years old, they just think people are people. They looked like people. They were what we now would call the Nordics, in the one-piece suit. And they seemed a bit anxious. And they actually asked him, he doesn't remember all of the conversation, but he remembers some of it. They actually asked him if he had seen any reptile. He can't remember if they used the word reptiles or reptilians. But either way, he knew the place like the back of his hand. He hadn't seen anything unusual there, so he just said no. Didn't really know what they were asking about, to be honest. And so they kind of visibly relaxed. And then they were saying that they had escaped their masters who would have made them slaves. And they used this kind of language. Now, Bill is a guy who does not use this kind of language. Let me say that kind of phrasing, let's say. He would say things very much more forthrightly. So and we actually found that statement written on a piece of paper, on one of his music, in his songbook, which he had written after the download to remind him of what they'd said. And when we found that, we thought, oh my God, this is so not the way Bill speaks. This is really interesting. And so he had no idea as a 9 or 10-year-old what the heck they were talking about. But they went on to tell him that the Earth was in trouble. And would he help? Oh, he was an excitable 10-year-old boy. So he said, yes, what do you want me to do? And they said, you'll know at the time. But the caveat to that was that he would end up being hated by a lot of humanity. And that has come to pass through various machinations of those who have persecuted him. And it's very interesting because whether, he sort of became contracted to some kind of experiment, we don't know at that point in his life. It's open to conjecture. But in the meantime, they said, would he like to go on a ride in their craft? And he said, yes. And I said, well, didn't you think anything about that? Didn't you think it was unusual? He said, no. He said, I'd been to the cinema to see Flash Gordon and I believed it all. I think it's so sweet. The innocence and the acceptance of a child. So he went on that ride and he was left initially with the kids. And the 2 kids were showing him these spheres, these little balls. And the kids were these were levitating, and they were using their mind to make these balls, follow their command. And he was just observing this. And then one of them said, well, you try it. And he did. And on the mental command, the ball, this little sphere, moved. He said, well, now I believe they did it for me because, look, I can't do it now. But maybe he had to be in a different gravitational environment for that to work. Who knows? So after he had that experience with the children, the parents or the mum came to get him, and they took him into another part of the ship where there was a unit. It was about a 3.5-foot plinth, a circular plinth, for want of a better term. It's always difficult to give these things names. And on top of that was like another 2-foot perspex, so transparent dome, under which was what looked like an old-fashioned spinning toy. And they're a circular thing, very much UFO in shape, actually, with a center point with a little handle, and you press it down and it spins away. And the guy was telling him about revolutions. He didn't even know what the word meant at that age. Really, he had no education, as I said. So he didn't really understand that it was to do with this spinning, and that they were trying to tell him this was the propulsion system. And they were trying to share with him that this is how the ship moved. And he observed that as this device spun, and span very, very fast, it would disappear from view. And then when it completely disappeared from view, the ship took off. And there was a window in the craft, a round window, and he could see the earth through it, and he could see it receding at a rate of knots. And then at one point he picked up a look of concern from the one person to the other, and the woman said, we have to take you back. So they brought him back. And, this was just like, oh, it's just another day in his life. And he came down, and he had put his bike, he'd gone to the field on his bike, and he'd put it by the gate as per usual. And this was his pride and joy because, they had very little money, as I said, and so the bike was a precious thing because they were hard pushed to get him that. So suddenly his bike was gone, and he was panicking because he needed it to get to the school to pick up his little sister. So it was nowhere in sight, so he thought, well, I better just run then and try and find it another time. And then suddenly he turned around, and there were what he called the space people again with his bike. So whether they were going to take his bike and keep it, and then they saw his distress and decided to return it, who knows? But he did ask them if he, they would see it, he would see them again. And they said, yes, look to the clouds, of course, which he's done for most of his life. And he's seen a tremendous amount, has Bill, but he hasn't seen those guys again, though he actually did see them when he was 5. And this is an interesting thing, because again, it's related to the ecology of the planet. And he was, as a little one, was by a pond, again in a woods, and he was looking at the newts. Those little funny-looking creatures are a bit like geckos. And he was just playing with them. He would look at them, he was fascinated by them, and put them back. But a lot of the youngsters in the area would take them out and, take them home and maybe have them as little pets before they died or whatever. And the space people were there as a group of 4. I mean, he didn't recognize me. He didn't know who they were or what they were, but he observed, again, in the download, he remembered this as part of the, plethora of memories that came back. And they said, they're endangered. You mustn't take them. Please tell your friends not to take the creatures. And so he said, I must have known something, he said, because I remember saying to the other children that the space people had told me that they're not to take them, and they didn't. So however he couched those terms as a 5-year-old, it obviously impacted the rest of his little buddies because they did leave them alone. So that was very interesting. And this thing about helping the planet because it was in trouble, and part of that meant that he had to suffer emotionally and otherwise because of it. Who knows what all of that is about. So
every case is so different, but as I said, Bill's is astonishingly different. And I don't know whether you've come across any cases like, that have a similar event like that in their childhood, but I also haven't heard of, anybody remembering consciously of going aboard the craft, of being, that was a contact experience. Both those Nordic ones were contact experiences. The rest have been abductions. And one of them, the major abductions, actually, if I go in sequence, the other one I mentioned was him being taken at gunpoint and told to go into the light. And this is kind of fascinating. When he was 18, he decided to join the army because he was at a bit of a loss what to do. He was getting in trouble as a young lad, and he thought he'd join the army. His dad had been in the army and come out when he was born. And he wanted to also to prove to his dad that he could do it, because he'd been in trouble as lads tend to get into when they've got nothing better to do. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so when he went to the recruitment place, he failed the entry test, the maths and the English, and they didn't seem too bothered about that. They said, don't worry, you'll pick it up when you get in, and they did the test for him. So I don't know whether that's something to be commented on or not. Was this normal? Were we taking sort of cannon fodder and just, shoving them in the units? Or was it because he was already flagged up to be known to be an abductee, contactee at this early stage? He was only 18, so this was in 1968. And when he got to his regiment, he was a nuclear soldier, and so he had already had to sign the Official Secrets Act. And what he was doing was joining a regiment in Sennelager, Germany, which was shared with, and honestly, you just couldn't make this up, it was shared with personnel from Area 51 who worked underground and from whom they were prohibited from fraternizing with. I think that's all just fascinating. The guys below ground, the Area 51 personnel, were ostensibly there to orchestrate the nuclear weapons. And I don't know if it was a known fact at that time that there were nuclear weapons in that part of the world. But these guys would test them every 3 years or so, and that was also part of the reason why they were there. So within the first week of Bill being in this regiment, he was abducted twice. It may be a week to 10 days, but he was abducted twice. And on the first occasion, he was with a guy called John. And when he arrived at this unit, a lot of the guys were away on practice camp, I think they call it. And it's a live firing exercise that they do every year. And they were coming to the end of that. But meanwhile, Bill was there with a small unit. So there were about 16 of them left on base at that time, the new guys joining and that kind of thing. So he'd met John, and they were sent off on an exercise near the Sennelager Ranges, which is where the tanks were all around and practicing, etc. And they were sent just as guard, as lookout. And so the two guys, and it was supposed to be a 2-hour on, 2-hour off relief, but they were never relieved. So after quite a while, the two guys, they just thought, well, we'll stay here because it's kind of pleasant here having a cigarette and just chatting, chewing the fat, and we don't have to do anything. So that's what they did. They just stayed where they were until one of them saw an orange mist. It was Bill. He said, look, look, look. And they thought it was a gas attack, This was one of the tests. So they said, we'd better get back and tell the NCO. So when they did, they found everybody else asleep in bed. And they told the NCO what they'd seen, and they said, well, that can't be right. They said, because the exercise has been stood down, so there's no more practice, so just go to bed. And everybody forgot about the orange mist. And so did the guys. So they had to now find somewhere to go to bed. So the place that they found was the top of a Saracen vehicle. And it's those that have all the camouflage stuff and all the rest of that. But that was all packed on top, so they thought, well, that'll make a comfy bed. So they were having a last cigarette before they were going to get their heads down, and they started observing this light, and it was like a mist. I can't remember at this point it was the orange mist again, or what, but within it with these lights, and Bill describes almost like they looked like flares with parachutes. It was really weird. And then they noticed that the body of men who had been asleep was suddenly not asleep. They were moving in some kind of uniformity towards something. And when they looked at what that something was, it was a bright light in the field nearby. And Bill being Bill, he was curious. So he began to get down from the Saracen to see what these guys were up to and where they were going. And John, left on the top, could suddenly see guys coming in with guns. We think at that time he saw the guns. And he started shouting for Bill to come back. But Bill was already right down the ladder of the side of the van, or the vehicle. And by the time he got to the ground, he turned round to find himself facing a guy dressed in black with a crew cut, an American accent, with a gun. And he said it was a bit like a Beretta, but about twice the size. And the guy said, walk toward the light. And John was calling Bill again. And so Bill was distracted for a moment and looked up toward John, but it was too late. And the next thing he saw was a guy with the gun pointed at his head, pointing the weapon at his head, and said, now walk into the light. And that was the last thing he remembered. And that memory, again, didn't come back until he was 44. And what he recalled of the next part of that event was the next day on parade. And because he was a brand new soldier, he didn't know anything about the protocols or whatever of this particular unit. So he was standing there with with the rest of the team in front of these high-up brass military. He didn't know that it was unusual to be on parade and for top military brass to be there. He just thought that was part of how things were. But what was unusual was that there were at least 3 guys dressed in black with these guns and around them, and these guys were also made to sign another Official Secrets Act, we believe, and told by the big brass that they were to say nothing of the events of the previous night. And at this point, John was whispering in Bill's ear, do you remember what happened? Words to this effect. And Bill had no idea what he was talking about. He really was completely, mind swiped. And he just thought that, maybe John was a bit drunk from maybe some beer that they'd had a night or 2 before. And so he had no idea. He was totally out to lunch about that. But what was very interesting is that he noticed that quite a lot of the guys were in battle dress, what they call BDs, which were phased out in the 50s. And although in the 60s there were maybe parts of it used here and there, it definitely wasn't part of the general uniform. It was fatigues. So that's just something to bear in mind. Now, there was another abduction event with John, which I won't go into at this point. People can read about it if they want, but happened within a very short space of time, within another day or 2. But what I want to share with you is the extraordinary thing of what Bill went through then. So he said, if we telescope, forward 40 years, he's trying to find John because Bill at that time was going through a massive adjustment period to the information, to the download. And he was looking for John so he could corroborate, he hoped, what he had now come to know as fact about that abduction. He didn't remember what happened after he'd gone into the light. That bit is still, blocked from his memory. But the fact that it was at gunpoint and by a soldier, so, what is that? Is there some collusion with the military, with ET, or was this a completely military event? We don't know. But it does beg the question. So anyway, Bill got hold of John's brother. He had a phone number and he took him to John's brother, who said, well, you won't get to speak to him because for the last 40 years he's become a recluse saying that he'd been abducted by aliens and, the trauma of all of that. And Bill said, well, that's exactly why I want to speak to him. So his brother said, well, and because Bill had seen, this brother had also joined the army, and I don't know if it was the same regiment as he was in. I think not. But anyway, the brothers had had a big fight back in 1968 at some point, and he'd witnessed it and was going to intervene, except for some other mates who said, no, you don't do that with brothers, you leave them alone. So he'd seen the two brothers fighting. Now, I say that because it anchors the reality of what he witnessed and saw and experienced, because Bill fed that event back to this brother, and he said, well, and they also had an unusual surname. So he said, well, it must be us. He said, but when were you in the army? And Bill said, well, 1968. He said, but that's impossible because we were in the 1950s.
That is weird. That is
it's
totally weird.
Incredible. And Bill, too, has had some real time slip things. And what he believes now is that maybe he went back to the 50s and experienced that. Or maybe he was mind controlled. Maybe there was some way of managing time that the army know about and took him back so he could have this experience with this guy back then. For whatever reason, who knows, it throws up so many questions about the nature of our reality. This is what is also absolutely fascinating, because he never did get to speak to John, but there was another man in his regiment called John Sutton, who's written a few books on the psychic side of life, because since leaving the army and everything else, he, that side of him opened up, and he's also an experiencer. But he and Bill had a simultaneous experience, paranormal experience, because it seems to be that the paranormal goes hand in glove with this kind of field. A lot of people who are experiencers seem to experience a lot of paranormal events, psychic
Joanne,
things.
I would like to ask you about that, because there are a lot of people on this continent who still are not making that connection, that there is something coincidental between the paranormal and the ufological / extraterrestrial.
Oh, it's massive. There is a huge link. It's absolutely concrete in my mind, from what I've heard. And it seems to be that there is a field, I don't know whether it's a field dilation or what, but it seems to be that, or a thinning. I don't know what technical term he would use to express the fact that those fields definitely then become interpenetrable with that person's field. So they start experiencing other aspects. It's like a bleed through in a way. Maybe that's a way to express it. But it is so common. And it's not to say that if you have paranormal events, you're an ET experiencer. Absolutely not. But it's really not unusual. In fact, it's more common than not for that to be a very strong element of the experiencer's life thereafter. And it may be for a period of time, or it may be for a lifetime. It also depends on the makeup of the person, I believe their frequency, and how they develop. But what Bill experienced with John Sutton, and I've had John Sutton on my own radio show, and also as a guest with me, with Bill, from time to time. And what they witnessed was some entity in the room. We don't know whether it was ET or not. They couldn't quite see, but they both witnessed it simultaneously. And they both, being lads at the time, thought each other was messing around, or another of their colleagues was messing about. And it turns out absolutely not. So not only can John Sutton, corroborate that Bill was in the army, but he was in the unit, so there's no question about Bill having been there or anything like that, because we get lots of people, who want to try and cause dissembling and, lack of clarity by suggesting that something is not the case with a person's life when we know it is. And, I've seen Bill's army documents to prove that he was definitely there if I needed that as well. And I show some of those in the book. But I think that is such a massive part of the story. And the fact that he was at a unit that was linked with Area 51 just screams out at me that there was more to this than just the nuclear base, because, you know, have you ever heard of guys being taken at gunpoint into the light? I don't know. He's the only person.
Never heard that.
I've never heard that at all. And what did they do to him? Because it was within this same time period, within 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, that he was also then, after the two major abductions, taken to England, to Porton Down, to this place where it is known that they do biological warfare testing, and they were testing LSD. And Bill has never... He's not a person who's done that kind of thing at all. He's not interested in that, the drug scene there. So it's not something that he would have understood. But he again experienced the after effects and also the brainwashing, where he had a massive spiral put on. There's a massive spiral on the wall in front of him, and he had two people simultaneously shouting in his ear, whatever they were shouting in his ear, obviously, to change his perceptions and awareness in some way, try and mold them. Bill's a very, very headstrong person, and I think that is one of the reasons why he is still alive today. He actually died in 2014, only to be resuscitated. And this man, he's now a very petite gentleman and quite disabled. He has a lot of disabilities. He thinks some of those are due to this interdimensional hopping. And he certainly has had implants and all the rest of that, which have caused him some issues and problems in the longer term. But not all the injuries are from the ET interaction. He's sustained a couple in the army as well. But his story is absolutely incredible also because I've never heard of anybody either seeing an animal abducted at the time, in parallel tandem with your own abduction virtually. And that too is also an extraordinary thing. And this, again, was before he was awake, if you like, before the 44 event. Now, what he said to me, he said, Joanne, if after 44 I had never experienced another abduction or event like that, I would have actually put down all the 44 years previously to mental illness, because he was desperate to put it down to mental illness. Basically, he didn't want this to be true. He was the last person in the world that wanted anything ET to be true around him, because he, as I said, he didn't believe in it. But he said it continued, so I knew it was true. And therein lies the rub. You can't unknow something. And as I said, it changed him forever as a person, but into somebody with a much wider ability to take in and assimilate information from the wider field. Very, very, very interesting. And just to go back to the animal abduction, since it was a cow, and on this event, he was doing some driving jobs, some casual driving work in between, whilst he was waiting, getting his musical career on the road, as it were. So he'd taken a 2-day job, and what it was to deliver some cookers, some ovens across the country. So he was in the kind of West Midlands of England, and it was one location was down in Southampton, so that was maybe 4 hours drive away. And the next location was a place called Evesham, which is near Oxfordshire, which was much nearer the West Midlands. So he did the further journey first, and then finished that later in the evening, got some supper, and finally parked up in this location. And I've been to this area as well, because this is just extraordinary. I still find this absolutely mind-boggling. And as he parked up, he turned his headlights off in case it was quite late, about 11 o'clock at night, because he didn't, in case there were any houses around, he didn't want to disturb people. And he noticed what he thought were initially like Christmas tree lights. He assumed it was in a field, and then all these other lights, and he assumed that was the town of Abingdon, which is near Oxfordshire, not too far from Evesham, his next drop-off point. And he didn't take any notice of it, he just thought that was that. Now, he noticed the animals in the field, and they were at the bottom of the field. And then he noticed that suddenly, when he looked up again, they were all in the middle of the field. Bill being Bill, he thought, well, okay, that's a bit odd, but never mind. And he continued, kind of having his supper, having his coffee. And then he noticed, as he looked up again, there seemed to be a triangle of light over the section of one section of the cows. And there seemed to be one cow, well, there didn't seem to be, there was one cow in the middle, in the beam of light, going up, making one hell of a racket, which is probably what caught his attention. And around this cow, there seemed to be, he thought they were little farmers. little farmers, I have to laugh, because he just didn't know. Little farmers in kind of boiler suits around this cow, and it was screaming blue murder. And he said, if I didn't know that it was a cow, I'd have thought it was a horse. He said, never heard a horse scream either, but he said it didn't, it sounded really incredible. And anyway, so I said, well, what did you think about that? He said, well, I just thought that the farmer, he said, because what do I know about farming? I know nothing about farming. He said, I just thought the farmer was out late dealing with one of the cows. And I said, how did you think it was getting, it was in the air? How did you get work? He said, I just thought it was a forklift truck. I said, really? He said, well, yes. He said, why would I think anything different? I didn't know. So I said, okay, all right. And then anyway, he continued to eat his supper, and then he lights a cigarette. Now, the moment that he lit a cigarette, everything went black. And as he looked up, he thought, oh, good, they finished for the night. I can get my head down and get some rest. But with that, the radio, which had been on very low, interestingly playing the song Memories, began to suddenly hit the roof with the volume. Now, Bill was also a radio engineer in the army, so he immediately dived under the area, which is kind of under the dash there, to try. He just thought some wires had come loose or something like that and caused all this white noise, or squelch as he calls it. And as he's got his head down there under the dash area, the entire cab lights up with more than sunlight light. So astonished, he suddenly gets up, having turned the radio down, and sees this light. And as he comes up, he's right in front of the rearview mirror, and he sees these faces. Now, he says they were not anything I'd ever seen before, and he thought, oh my God, I've left the back of the truck open, there's somebody in there, forgetting that what he was seeing was a reflection from the plate glass at the back of the cabin. And what that was reflecting was the windshield. So as he sort of adjusted his body to sit up directly in front of the windshield, he was then confronted by 3 grey faces of greys, at the window, as if they were pressed right on the window. And you can imagine his intense shock. Because then what happened, because lots of things were going on at this time. There was some kind of vehicle to the left that he described as a kind of leaning tower of Pisa that seemed to be like a kaleidoscopic mosaic of mirrors reflecting a lot of stuff. We don't know exactly what that is. It's really unusual. And then in the meantime, these greys are coming through the windshield as if the windshield has suddenly become like sticky plastic and the rest of the windshield remains intact. And the next thing he knows, he's up and out through the windshield and going up into some light, into a craft with these guys around him. And he is then directed, and he finds himself lying on, the typical bed or gurney, whatever you want to call it. And he's left on his own for a moment, and as he can't move, he seems to be sort of floating also. He's absolutely incapacitated, and all he can move is his eyes, and they were taught in the army to really use peripheral vision a lot. So as he was doing that and lying down also, he noticed a big archway off to one side, and on a slab there, he saw the cow, and he knew it was dead. He just knew it was dead, and he saw them doing some movements with their arms in front of the cow, and the next thing, it was off the craft. And he thought, oh my God, I'm next. They're going to kill me. With that, a grey scuttles over and puts his hand near or on his chest. He said, that's how I know how many fingers they had. And says, no, you're human. And he remembers something very hot going up one of his nostrils, his right nostril, we think. And then he saw a drill coming down toward his eye, and at that point, he blacked out. He then comes to in maybe the same room, we don't know, or another room, and there's a big screen. And he sees, again, this seems to be a bit of a common theme. He sees a birth of a baby, and then he sees warfare. And he's not sure what this is all about or what he's being told. I mean, apart from the obvious about what he's viewed, and some other things go on. And the next thing he knows, he's in another location, and he's clearly aware that they're in some watery location, having just been, not in a watery location. And he says there's a massive porthole, round window, and there is nothing stopping the sea coming in but some kind of, I would call it like a force field. He said it's almost, you could see the water where it was slightly curving the outer layer of the porthole. He said a bit like the tension you'd see on a slightly overfilled cup. And he said on the other side of this window was a woman, and she was very unusual. He said attractive, but unusual in that she was clearly Asian, with the Afro-American nose or African-American nose, and blonde hair, completely blonde hair. And he said, I know she asked me some questions. He said, I don't remember the questions, but I remember my answers. And basically what he said to her was, I can't, because I have family, I have a mother, I have a wife, and they'll wonder where I am. Words to that effect. And with that, he finds himself going down some kind of ramp, and he then thinks, oh my God, wait till I tell my mother, because one thing that he and his mother used to argue about was this subject and the paranormal. And he didn't believe in it, of course, so they would argue. And he said, oh my God, wait till I tell my mother. Because one of the things his mother thought would be really super cool would be to be abducted, because she was fascinated by the Betty and Barney Hill case. And the moment he had that thought, it was instantly wiped. And he thought, oh, tell her what? And then he had the same thought of telling his wife, wait till I tell my wife. And then instantly it was wiped, and he thought, what? Tell her what? And then he was outside the van. And he came to, if you like, to his normal self outside the van, thinking, oh, what the hell am I doing out here? And he knows that if he's outside the van and it's unexpected, after a sleep, he might want to pee. So he thought, oh, I must have got out the van to have a pee. Okay, I'll go and have a pee. So he now had seen a house some little distance off, so he went to the other side of the van so he wouldn't be seen having a pee, only to find the carcass of the mutilated cow. I mean, what a shock. Now, at that point, how clever are these guys? They've so wiped his mind, he is so controlled, that the sight of the cow does not trigger any memories at all. All he thinks is, oh my God, somebody's going to think I killed the cow. And he just panicked and got out of there. Not, oh, that's the cow that ET was working with last night. And he said it was the usual kind of, well, I'm saying it was the usual kind of mutilation scenario, that the rectum had been cored out, the udders, or that area. So you actually couldn't see the sex of the animal, and part of its jaw was gone and what have you. And I rather think, my opinion is that regarding the cow, is that the reason that it was screaming so much was because it was actually being cut and worked on as it was being taken up. And I know that from some of the animal mutilation results and analysis, they have found that some of the enzymes that have been found in the tissues afterwards, or the chemistry of it, shows that the animal would have been alive when whatever was done to them was done to them. which is a shocking shame. But there we go. So those are some of the most incredible events of Bill's life, but there are a ton more. How this guy has lived so long and not known of these events is absolutely, and they are so freaking mind-bending. It's a testament to the mind control techniques of ET and the military, I have to say. It is something else.
So even over there, you have mentioned the Men in Black quite a few times. Do you think all Men in Black are the same? Do you think they're human or a mixture of alien race as well? What do you think they are?
Oh, well, yeah, may well be a mixture. Certainly, these men in black uniforms in the military were definitely, well, look, I'm saying they were definitely human. He thought they were human. He thought they were, dressed in black was like their uniform. They weren't the Men in Black that you hear knocking at the door saying you shouldn't be talking about that. He's never had those Men in Black come to see him. But interestingly enough, this is just an interesting vignette. So I don't think they're all human. They don't seem to be. I've heard testimony of how they don't seem to have a very natural human way about them. And, as human to human, you definitely, pick that up, wouldn't you? And I haven't had a lot of people tell me about the Men in Black, though several have, I have to say. And it's normally a warning, do not speak. And there are some who are definitely human. And so there must be this kind of interactive thing going on between those on this planet, humans or hybrids who are working with ET for whatever reason that, send out these signals, because those are clearly to terrorize and cause fear. This is not, any benign thing. But the other guys that Bill had interaction with, who were dressed in black also, was when he was about 9. And he was sent out on this one occasion by his mum to get some medicaments for his brother and sent into town. And on his way back, he was stopped by a couple of Americans. Isn't that interesting? So this would be 1959 in the UK, in the West Midlands, in a very poor area. And they told him that they were Rosicrucians. Again, this is completely bonkers, completely wild. And they said, they must have said to him something about meeting his parents and about something to do with him being involved with them, and they would need his parents' permission, because the next thing is that they're at his parents. And because he was such a loner, his parents were a little bit concerned for him. And so they said about this kids club, and so they took him to this kids club. The parents had agreed. And actually, they said that they would come for him at another time because he was a little bit perhaps too young for the Rosicrucians, but they left him with the Mormons, who were at this place, which was the Royal Antediluvian Order of the Buffalo, which actually isn't that ancient an establishment group. It's about 1850s, I think. But anyway, very interesting because it was run by the Mormons. But the interesting thing was that Bill said it was great because they taught us baseball and stuff like that. But on the inclement weather days, which are plenty of in the UK, they would have the kids inside and they would be teaching them, this really kind of got my goat, they would be teaching them how to work with telepathy and all of that kind of thing, mind games, teaching the kids to work with their minds to interact and impact physical phenomena, and also, doing this, as I said, telepathy thing. So what was it about this kid, from this impoverished background that had, signaled him as being somebody of interest, a person of interest? Because clearly, there's something about him. We don't know what exactly. But anyway, age 9, he was already smoking. And they didn't like that. So being the strong-willed little boy then that he was, and still is as an adult, he said, well, if I can't do that, then I don't want to be here. So he left them after about 3 months. But I think that is a very telling indication of, maybe his ability to be suggestible. I don't know. Maybe he had the right genetics. His family lineage doesn't show anything remarkable in that respect. Some people's do, in terms of blood group, bloodline, all the rest of it. In his case, nothing stands out particularly, which is even more intriguing. Because you wonder why. You wonder what it was that signaled him out from, very, very young. So,
Joanne, we only have about a minute and a half here before we have to go to break here at the top of the hour again.
Do we have time to hear about Carl?
Oh, Carl. You had to bring up Carl.
Yes, I did.
You know what? We'll get into Carl in the next hour.
Oh, okay.
Carl is just, you know what? Every show we talk about Carl in the chat rooms or something, because Carl has left a real void around this show since he decided to appear at my window on April 20th, 2015. Wow. And Carl just, it hurts my feelings. I'm not going to lie. It hurts my feelings. You just can't show up. You know what? I feel like I was treated like a one-night stand, Joanne.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. Just no love. Just there he is, and there he's gone. I feel very hurt by him. Very hurt.
Well, I can't wait to hear more, and perhaps of the Sasquatch stuff. I'd love to.
Oh, we can get into a few stories. I got a couple of stories. Some may say I have a plethora of stories. A plethora. That's our word of the show around here. Plethora. So, yes, we will definitely get into a few stories like that, and I have no problem sharing with them. Indeed, and sharing them with you as well. I'm going to get you to hold on. We're going to hop out for a break. Our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio, Joanne Summerscales. Her website, theetnewsroom.com, if you want to check it out. I highly suggest you do, because there's a lot of good information. If you're an abductee, contactee, paranormal experiencer, she runs the whole gamut on her website, theetnewsroom.com. Joanne is going the distance with us tonight. I'm excited about it. I know you guys are too, and we will be talking more ET Contact and so much more right around the corner on hour number 3 at spacedoutradio.com. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this. Looking for a great weekend getaway this fall? Hi there, this is Dave Scott. Come on up to the heart of British Columbia for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Speakers from all over North America are coming to discuss Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and intuitiveness for the 3-day event, September 29th to October 1st. For more information, go to spacedoutradio.com and click on the Caribou Paracon banner and book your tickets today. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET Contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us as we kick off the week back at SOR headquarters here. Yes, we are back from the forest fires. We were allowed back on Saturday. I'm more than happy to be back home, and even though I'm dodging a bear and a cougar in my yard, it still makes for a fun time when you are back home and allowed back in your house. Tell me about it, man. It has been stressful. You guys know how it's been on me, but thank you so much for putting up with me over the time when I was evacuated from my house due to the forest fires here in British Columbia. I really do appreciate that. Tomorrow night on the program, we get into remote viewing. Our guest will be Lori Williams. We get started at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 150 countries around the world. We're live on KTLK, the Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Mendacious is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could be like Mr. Skeptic and use hashtag Spaced Out Radio to connect with me live during the show. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on iHeartRadio in the United States. Canada just won't pick us up yet, even though we're a Canadian show. Damn you, Canadian iHeart, shaking my fist at you. And our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Read up on the encounter online. Check out UFO Seekers or Contact TV. And you could go to our store, Spaced Out Radio Store, and pick up some swag today for yourself. Tonight, for the final time, we introduce Joanne Summerscales. Her website, the etnewsroom.com, checks out everything to do with paranormal, with ETs, the connection between the two, and so much more. Joanne, thank you so much for going the distance tonight in early morning for you. It's just past 7 o'clock in the morning your time.
Yeah, it is, and I think I've just about woken up, actually, so I'm probably going to be a bit more coherent.
Absolutely. You know, and it's a lot of fun to be able to talk these topics because, you know, it's very close to my heart. I personally have had 5 encounters with extraterrestrials, well, 3 encounters with 5 extraterrestrials. And the last one being in 2015, April 20th, during this show, where we were talking Buddha of all topics with a gentleman named Harvey Kraft, who coincidentally was so affected by that little incident during the show that he ended up investigating and writing another book on, fictional of course, on extraterrestrials. And I'll tell you, there was nothing more, I don't want to say frightening, but it scared me. I'm not going to lie. Because I saw something move out of the corner of my eye out the window. And this happened in my old house, and I had a studio or a bedroom at the front of the house, and we had a rancher-style house, and it was right by my front door, and I thought, oh goodness, someone is coming over. My dogs are going to go crazy, and barking dogs never make good radio if they're being heard in the background. And so anyways, long story short, I put my microphone on hold or on mute after about 15, 17 minutes of broadcasting, and I swivel my chair out the window to see who is there. And for some reason, for 3 nights in a row, I had not put my outdoor lights on. And as I swiveled my chair to look, my eyes focused on these 2 big black eyes and this giant gray head about 7 feet away from me, looking at me on the other side of the window. And I did what any man would do. I jumped back, I swore, and I did this quick head shake to see if I was actually seeing what I was seeing, and Carl was gone. Disappeared. Now, I talked to a good friend of mine right after that. His name is Ronald Keith Andrews, and he comes on this show the first Friday of every month, which Ron will be on next week on the 4th. And I said, Ron, this is what happened. I'm like shaking, I'm trembling, and he says to me, he goes, Dave, what do you expect? He goes, do you really think only earthbound people are listening to SOR?
Excellent.
So that was my big-time close encounter with Carl the Alien. And to this day, now Mr. Skeptic at hashtag Spaced Out Radio says, Dave, I know you think Carl's appearance outside your window was somehow mystical, but did you ever consider there may be? Yes, I did. It just was weird. It was strange, it was weird, and I would absolutely love to have Carl show back up again. I celebrate the anniversary now. Every year it happens, and he no-shows on me. He just no-shows on me. Just no class.
And so were your other experiences and the other 4, is that...
well, my other experiences were, I actually, September 29th going into the 30th of 2014, I woke up on the table while I was being abducted.
Uh-oh.
And I woke up to childlike fingers running through my hair. And my face was buried down in, you know, when you go for a massage, they have that donut that you put your face down into so you can breathe. Yeah, my face was on one of those, and I was on a steel table. And I felt the little fingers on the top of my head. And I looked over my right shoulder at first. Everything was dark. I looked over my left shoulder, and there was the bright light with 3 little gray dudes there. They were kind of like... they look like honestly, they look like a combination between a gray and the character E.T. Like, just the jawline was that of E.T., but the eyes and the heads were like grays. And these guys were tiny. They were only like 3-4 feet, if that. And they were wearing the silverish black onesie. Mm-hmm. And I could see the hands and everything, and I actually started laughing last hour when you mentioned how your friend had to pee. Because, and I'll tell you this is only the second time I've ever heard this. I was the first one. So I totally recall them cutting open the back of my head, and I remember screaming. And then I remember in my friend Samantha Mowatt's voice saying to me, don't worry, it doesn't hurt. Just let them finish what they need to do, and you know, it didn't hurt anymore all of a sudden after that. And to be honest with you, as weird as this sounds, it actually felt kind of cool. And I have to tell you this. Every time I tell this story, where I was implanted, my head starts to pulsate, which it is right now. Where they went in. And so I felt the first guy kind of pulling my skin towards my scalp. Okay, the front of my scalp. And the second guy comes in, and I don't even know how to explain it, but this sound, I don't know what that sound was. Okay, I'd never heard it before, but I felt the saw cutting open my skull. And then the second guy trying to jam his fingers into my skull to reef it up while the third guy tries to jam in the implant. My head is going crazy right now as I say this, right? And as they're doing this, and you got to realize, to me now, I don't know why, there is no pain. There is no pain. And I am just literally taking this all in. Like, I'm as weird as it sounds, I remember being excited about this. All right? Oh. And as they're doing this, all of a sudden I had this urge that I had to go to the bathroom. So with my face buried in this donut, okay, I start saying to these guys, you got to hurry up. I'm going to piss all over the table here if you don't get me home. I gotta pee, guys. Hurry up. I don't want to make a mess. So here I am. Here they are working on my head. My head right now, once again, is pulsating. It feels really weird and cool right now. Right? And here they are trying to jam this implant into me. And I'm just complaining that I have to pee. So...
Very surreal.
No, and you know what's funny about it? When I told Lori and Fenton, I don't know if you know who Lori and Fenton is.
Yeah, I do. She's wonderful. Love her, yeah.
When I told Lori in this story, she just started killing herself laughing, and she goes, you know how I know this story is true, Dave? And I said, how? She goes, because nobody would admit to getting in an argument about having to take a piss on a table. Right? So, anyways, all of a sudden, I wake up. My head is buried in my pillow. And I am on top of the covers, something that I never sleep. I never sleep on my stomach. I'm always on my side or on my back. And here I am lying on top of my covers with my face buried in my pillow. I get up, my head is throbbing. I walk to the bathroom as quickly as I can. And I must have stood there for about 4 or 5 minutes, relieving myself. One of the best I've ever taken. But that's neither here nor there. But the whole point is, you know, it was a strange, strange experience. I remember one other experience in just a snippet. And that one wasn't as pleasant. I remember I'm 5'8" 8 3/4 because God couldn't give me the extra 1/4 inch to be 5'9". and I remember this one, and it was really, really short. And I remember there was about 4 or 5 of these taller grays around my height. And I remember them having my arms pinned back. And all of a sudden they said, he's waking up. Get him home, get him back. He's waking up, and I'm left-handed. And I freed my left hand from these guys because they are relatively weak. And I remember punching one right in the chest as hard as I could. And it's hard to explain, but I don't recall anything before or after this. I don't even know. It could be a dream because I have a vivid imagination about aliens. I don't know. But I remember punching this one right in the chest, and it felt so rubbery, it was like punching silicone or Jell-O or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not too sure about that because I've heard other people who have hit them, and they have that same silicone or type feeling that they have had. So
I heard that too.
But the first one I saw came. This was April. I got to start the story on April 10th of 2014. I had a close encounter with the third kind where I was actually called outside at a friend's house at about 10 o'clock at night, where her and I went outside and I asked them to turn their lights on, and they did for me 3 times from the ground. 5 days after that, I met Samantha Mowat, and I was kind of pacing around the house. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and her and she goes, Dave, do you want me to go outside with you? And I said, yeah, sure. Known this lady 20 minutes. Take her outside in the middle of the day, not a cloud in the sky. Weird part was there wasn't even an airplane in the sky. And usually our flight path was pretty busy. And we walked behind the farm where we were at and go into the forest. And that's where I saw the 10 to 12 footer.
Oh.
That kicked everything off. Yeah. So, I am an experiencer. And I'm proud to say it.
Yeah, was that 10 to 12 footer a grey kind of being or somebody totally different?
It started off as a creamy white color, like a little bit darker than milk, but not much. And then it changed to a tan color.
Okay.
And
it's still the grey kind of configuration?
No, totally different. Totally different. I don't even know how to explain this guy, but I do know that I kept on saying to Samantha, what the F is that? Because at that time, I'm 40 years old, and I'm staring 200 feet away from me in the middle of the day of an extraterrestrial standing in the forest staring back at me. I didn't see the other guy there who started telepathically communicating with Samantha saying, we're not here to take you. You can come over and say hello, but we're really worried about the man's health.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, you have to realize I'm darn near soiling my shorts at this time. And I want to say this, and my audience has heard me say this before, okay? My audience has heard me say this. I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared of what I was seeing. What I was scared of was the fact that at 40 years old, my life was officially changed at that point.
I understand that. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, as I've tried to explain to people, it's like having a piece of paper, Joanne, with every rule, regulation, guideline that you have been taught in your life, from your parents to your grandparents to your elders to your teachers to your ministers to everybody who has had an influence in your life, whatever they've taught you. And then realizing that it's all baloney. Because as a person who grew up I never went to church, but still brought up as a believer in God and the devil, and if you're good, you go up, if you're bad, you go down. You know, nobody told me what to do when I see a 10 to 12 foot extraterrestrial standing 200 feet in front of me saying nothing, just staring at me. And it was there for about 15 to 20 minutes.
Wow. Was it, would you say that it had an insectoid orientation?
No, it was, I didn't see arms or legs on it. I saw this big round ball that was looking at me with this oddly shaped, very thin body.
Okay.
Yeah.
How intriguing. And did the health condition or situation, did you then deal with that? Did that, get sorted?
Well, the way I like to put it is, when you watch a horror movie, okay, and you see the person, like the shark is like 45, 50 feet away, and the person's not doing anything. It's still person's still standing in the water, and you're like, get out of the water, get out of the water. But they just stand there, you know what I'm saying? That's what it was like. It was like being paralyzed.
Okay.
Because I wasn't paralyzed out of fear. My mind could not and I've looked at this in my head thousands of times, okay? I've replayed this thousands of times, okay? Your mind cannot comprehend a daytime encounter. Because here's the thing. If it happens at night, you could write it off as a dream. You could write it off as an active imagination. You can write it off as a nightmare, whatever you want to call it, night terror or whatever. Okay? You can write it off as that. But when it happens, when in the middle of the day, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there is you and your friend, so you have your witness, okay? And you see something that technically is not supposed to exist. It changes your immediate perspective, or it changes your perspective on life effective immediately. There is no change. There is nothing that can change your perspective on life more. All right? And I am a firm believer that what I saw that day was real, and nothing, absolutely nothing, can change my mind. And I've had people trying to break it down in, all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
You weren't there. Don't even argue with me. You weren't there. Okay? Do you want me to...
But Dave, what I'm interested in as well, because the health and well-being of people is a passionate interest of mine, is the issue of your health that was flagged up. Did you deal with that? Did you even know about it?
Well, here's the thing. What they did was they said, you're more than welcome to come on over and say hello. However, we are concerned about the man's health. Now, Samantha wanted to go over there. She felt the urge to go over there and give these guys a hug. And I said to her, don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare leave me. I am not doing this by myself. I said, I'm not going back to that house without you there. Because here's the thing. At that point in my life, all I thought was extraterrestrials are bad. I saw what happened in Fire in the Sky. That's based on a true story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even though Travis Walton now comes out and says, well, that wasn't the ending. That's not what happened at all. I didn't learn that until I got into this show. So my opinion of extraterrestrials at that time was 100% negative.
Yeah.
However, the confusing part was we're concerned for the man's health. Me being the man. Right? And so Samantha ended up staying with me. We watched I couldn't get my eyes off of this. I don't even think I blinked. I know I didn't move.
Yeah.
Right? And I couldn't get my eyes off of this. And Samantha actually stayed with me. We stayed looking at this guy for about 15, 20 minutes. And then she was getting called to another part of the field, or of the forest, pardon me, to the right of us. And she goes, I'm picking up other extraterrestrials over here. Do you want to go check it out? I said, yeah, let's go check it out. Because I started to calm down. I started to relax. So we walked to this we said goodbye to these guys, whoever they were. We walked to the right of us about 100 feet, 150 feet. And we're looking around. And you can feel them all around you. Okay? And you see things moving out of the corner of your eye. You see things moving out of the corner of your eye. And you're like, is that them? Is that them? But you're not sure. Is it a stick falling, a branch falling that's broken off? Is it a bird? Is it a squirrel? Is it a chipmunk? What is it? You know what I'm saying? And you're not seeing them. So we stood there for about 10 minutes, even though you could feel them. You could feel them watching you all around. And we were scanning all over the place. All over the place. And Samantha is so connected. It's sickening how connected she is. And she's like, do you see anything over there? No. Do you? And I would say, do you see anything over there? She goes, I feel something over there, but you couldn't see anything. So we went back to the original spot after about 10 minutes. And the other ones were gone. And then we walked back to the farm.
And so, just picking up on that health thing, did you have a known health issue or not?
No. It was just, they were picking up on my panic, my anxiety.
Oh, you think that's what it was?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They were picking up on that. And I think they were afraid that if I did go over there, I think they were afraid that I may have a heart attack or something.
Oh, okay. I'm with you.
So right. I really strongly believe, and I know Samantha believes this too, that they gave me the opportunity of choice.
Yeah.
Because they were actually really, really concerned for my own health.
Do you have any, having had the experiences that you've had so far? I'm just going at a slight a tangent here. What's your opinion of the Stan Romanek face at the window? Do you think that's
okay? You know what? That has come up a lot today, and it's weird you bring that up because I actually posted that on my Facebook today. What people thought of the movie on Netflix. Now. Right. Obviously, this is a very sensitive topic because of the pedophilia charges that Stan Romanek is up on right now. Sure. Let's take that and put that to the side. There's a lot of people, too, who believe that Stan Romanek is a fake, somebody who got addicted to the popularity of his videos and popularity of being the man when it came to ET abduction and contact, so on and so forth. I'm still personally up in the air about it. I really am. However, I've heard a lot of people try and break down, and I've made comments today to people in a couple different rooms that I saw posts on, including my own. And I said, they're like, well, nobody reacts like that when an ET comes to your window. I said, really? I did. Yeah. I did. How are you supposed to react? Here's the problem that I see, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Here is the problem that I see with 90% of the people out there who are quote-unquote ufologists. You've never been in those shoes.
Yeah.
You've never been... Whether he is a faker or whether he is telling God's honest truth, you've never been in the shoes. And to me, I will tell you this. There's a number of things on that video that I do not believe. Okay? Yeah. However, that one at the window, as someone who has experienced that, I can tell you I think that is 100% true.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That is interesting. I interviewed Stan back in 2013, actually, when I was over at the International UFO Congress, and I liked him. I liked him, and I think that he has kind of lost his way a little bit, but I don't disbelieve what he's been through in the whole, and I think what he's going through now is another one of those ploys to muddy the waters, to give experiences a bad name, to all of that. I really do, because Bill also has been through such harassment, it's unbelievable, where they also tried to pin a pedophile label on him. I mean, honest to God.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Stan Romanek, okay? If you want to get into the whole pinning the pedophilia thing on him, and let's just say hypothetically, because we're going to get sensitive here for now, if he did not abuse children or get involved with photos, videos, whatever sickening, disgusting habit that he potentially has, because right now, let's face it, people, he's innocent until proven guilty. But if the government wanted to go after him, the problem that I have is Stan is a nobody. And I mean that with all due respect to him and his wife and their family. Stan is like you, me, the audience, okay? He's a nobody on this planet. His opinion is not going to change the world's health problems or the food shortage problems in countries or the economic problems in countries. You know, here is a guy who's just having some extraordinary experiences, if they're real. And here he is, all of a sudden being said, that he's computer illiterate and somebody put a bunch of child porn on his computer. He doesn't know how it got there. And that's what the charges stem from. However, I will say this. If his story is not fabricated, and the way he was continually challenging the government, okay, because he was getting a little crass with it, I think we can agree with that. Mm-hmm. If he was continually challenging the government, what better way to shut him up? What better way to shut him up? Because even if he is proven innocent, okay, and I'm not saying whether I think he is or not. I'm going to, pull an American side here and plead the fifth on my opinion there, if I'm allowed to do so. I don't know how that works being Canadian. But I will say this. If he did not do it, if he's innocent of those charges technically, okay, his career is still ruined.
Yeah.
There is no better way to ruin someone than that accusation. And that is the truth.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So I'm not sure whether he did or not,
Mhm.
but I can tell you this. It's an intriguing story that as much as I've wanted to cover the Stan Romanek story on this show, I've kind of shied away from it. We have talked about it at times on this show, but I mean, when it gets into the whole child pornography and pedophilia accusations, that's where things get a little ugly. But as for the window experience, where I see a lot of people sitting there saying, oh, that's not how you would react, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Joanne. Do you no, but do you find a lot of people out there, Joanne, who've never had that experience are way too critical to say, "Oh, that's not how you would react." Yes. If that happened to me, I would grab my phone and I would start taking pictures, or I would do this, or I would do that. And you know what? No, you wouldn't.
I agree with you. No, you wouldn't, because we've all had moments, even if it's not paranormal, where we have been taken unawares, let's say, and it's the flight or fight response. You don't suddenly pick up a phone. You don't. You either run or you whatever, and or you're in shock for a moment. It's very rare, whatever the situation is, when you're taken unawares or sent into a sudden state of being startled, that you have your wits about you. We're not normally, humanity doesn't tend to work like that. And, the odd person may, but it's very unusual. And, I go with you. I think his reaction, yes, it does look a bit dramatic, but does it mean it's not real? No, of course it doesn't.
Well, and you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But a lot of people, when I hear people out there who and it's happened to me, like when I had my Bigfoot sightings. Did you have your phone on you? Why didn't you grab a picture? When you have something standing in front of you or happening that is not supposed to exist,
yeah,
and you don't, and trust me when I say this, people, you forget time.
Oh, you do.
You forget time because your brain cannot comprehend what your eyeballs are seeing. So that's where, a lot of people, when they sit there and say, oh, you were within 100 feet of 2 Bigfoot, why didn't you grab a picture? Never thought about it. And then, oh, that's a cop-out answer. No, it's not. You know why? Because you haven't been put in that situation. Now, I can tell you, again, if in the mountains of where I am, there's Sasquatch. I can tell you right now, if I wanted, I would have my camera ready, because now I've had that experience, right? I don't have video cameras set up around my house, checking my windows to see if Carl returns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you this, anybody who says out there, oh, I would have done this or I wouldn't have done that. No, you wouldn't have. You're a liar, because you've never been put in that situation. And I will argue that point ad nauseum.
Well, I also, again, we are not schooled or trained or educated in any way except, as entertainment about the subject. So you don't expect it, and you don't know what there is out there to expect. And I totally, absolutely, 100% believe that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever, is a reality. And I had another brightening of my perceptions not too long ago, when somebody I completely honour, respect, and believe their story told me that they had an experience when they were 13 or 14, 13 I think they were, and they're now in their 50s, that they've never spoken about before because it was too shocking, and that they had just begun to dip their toe in the water to talk about it, and it was still very, very shocking and challenging for them. And that was, in the UK, a face-to-face contact with something I didn't think would be in this dimensional plane, that's for sure, was a werewolf. I mean, wrap your brains around that. And this child who was faced with this being was so traumatized that she was a mental wreck. And even speaking about it currently causes a massive fear in her because she doesn't want it to be attracted to her so that she has another experience of it. So, she began exploring whether anybody else had such an experience. And I think I don't know where in America, but anyway, she does find that there are some people talking about it. There's Dogman Radio and that kind of thing. But that was a revelation to me also, because I've heard about it, but I hadn't, you hear about it in mythologies, but I hadn't heard about it as a reality in this 3D world. And whether it's a dimensional shifting thing, whether it lives in this dimension, I don't know. But she saw it physically to the point of smelling it, feeling its breath
Absolutely.
on her. And I don't know whether you've come across that or any of your,
Well,
folks.
you know what? Bob in the SOR Space Travelers Club just put a mild example of this. He says, I saw 4 huge antlered elk trotting down my street a few years ago. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, like they were hooked up to Santa's sleigh. It was 3 a.m. and light snow. Very magical. And I had no thought of grabbing a camera. It was absolutely breathtaking.
Ah, how lovely.
But here's a simple example of someone who just wants to take in the moment.
Well, and also, you have to have a presence of mind to go, do you have it to hand, or is it in the bottom of your handbag, or in the bottom of your in your drawer? I mean, you've got to go find it, and then you've broken the connection in a way. There's also that. But that's interesting, because also what I'm fascinated in is that am I right in thinking then that you've had your experiences in adulthood only and not as a child?
I have no idea if I had him as a child.
So
I have a psychic friend, Derek White Sky Cloud, who believes I was taken at 7.
Right, okay.
Now, whether or not that happened or not, I have no idea. It's something that I will have to go through a hypnotherapy session or two to try and figure out.
Yeah, it's just interesting. The majority of people, the memories come back, and it's often from childhood, including childhood, and then there's a few people, and Stan Romanek is one of them. Just going back to him, who talk about it from adulthood. An interesting. Do you have any of those links within your family? Have your parentage, grandparents experienced it, or your child or other half, perhaps?
No.
Is it just you?
No, nothing. It was. I don't know about my sisters.
Okay.
My father, I come from a family where mom was very, very uber religious growing up, so we don't talk about things like that. And my dad, up until probably a year ago, was such a 5 senses guy that he just would not believe. He wouldn't believe it if a UFO landed in front of him, kind of thing. But it's funny how he has seemed to change his stance in regards to that. And it's funny because he started kind of opening up. And in my town here at the museum, I do a paranormal tour. And a couple months ago, he came on my tour, and I don't think he's missed one since now. I gave him a little K2 meter. And in the one house, there is a little girl in the house. And my dad went up there, and he's just standing there, and all of a sudden, this K2 meter starts going off in his hand, and it is going absolutely haywire. So I said, "Hey, Dad, well, say hello to the little girl." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Look at the meter you have in your hand." And it's going haywire. And all of a sudden, my dad's hand just starts shaking. He got so nervous. So now it's got him hooked. He tells all his friends about the stories now, and now he's all proud that I am a weirdo, whereas before he was, just make sure you don't use your real name. You know what I'm saying? So it's pretty interesting, how all of a sudden, at 68 years old, he's had his own experiences now, and he's okay with it. You know what I'm saying? And he wants more of it now. He wants to learn more. He wants to do this full time now, be a ghost hunter. I'm like, yeah, Dad, let's do it. Let's rock this.
Oh my God! What does your mother think?
Oh no, we're playing with Satan's children, man. We're playing with Satan's children.
Well, one of the things I've been trying to do as well is to try and get people talking about this a bit more in generally, not in any necessarily. I mean, I've held a few conferences, and that's been great, and had the speakers on their experiences and that kind of thing. And what I'm trying to do this coming Saturday, I'm holding an experiencer open mic night. And I think I might have sent you the flyer, and the flyer is actually designed by an experiencer. And this is quite interesting because he's a Scots guy, and about 5 or 6 years ago, he was in Glasgow where he suffered a stroke. And he was in hospital about a week without any attention, which I find hard to believe, but, I believe him. He's no reason to lie to me. And I've got to know him quite well over the last year or two. And he said, finally, about 3 a.m. in the morning, he got up. He was in a room by himself in the hospital, and he went to the night staff, and he said, look, have I had a stroke or what? I mean, I honestly find it difficult to believe that he was there nearly a week and nobody had even told him about the stroke or been to see him to consult with him about his issue and anything. But anyway, she said, oh, yes, you've had a stroke. And then with that, a doctor pops her head around and says, oh, yes, but what we're really interested in is the artifact in your brain. Now, they didn't call it a foreign body, called it an artifact. I thought, what the hell?
Nice.
He went, what the hell? Now, he's had some experiences, so he went back to his room and he kind of put a mental message out. He said, okay, guys, if you're there, then show yourselves. And sure enough, out of his window in the hospital, he's seeing a UFO. So I now have a copy of his scan, his brain scan, which does definitely show an anomalous object. And was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. Within the last sort of 18 months, I think it is, he's had a quintuple heart bypass surgery, bless him. And so with that, with those checkups and everything, he also showed the consultant his brain scan because it took him ages to get hold of the scans. He had them a while ago. I exhorted him to get hold of them so I could see this and show it, and which I will be showing shortly as well. And the consultant showed the nurse and grabbed her and said, look at this, wow, in response to him showing him his brain scan. And then the next checkup, my guy, who's Dan, said, and what about, the brain scan? The guy goes, oh, yeah, nothing, just nothing about that. Like, from the excitement and oh my goodness, before, on the first showing of this scan, to, oh, yeah, nothing there, nothing to see, move on.
See, that's something that I'm debating on whether or not to do one day, because every time I tell the story about my implant,
yeah,
it's funny because my head pulsates in that exact same spot where it happened.
Yeah.
And I would love to check that out. Would I have any luck? I have no idea if I would. I would be kind of disappointed if nothing was there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say, this guy didn't have a brain scan because of anything to do with that. He didn't know there was an implant in his brain. He had no idea, although he was an experiencer. But, there it is, large as life, and I've got brain scans of a couple of other people as well. Now, what I was going to say about this experiencer open mic night is that it's an opportunity for people. This is taking place in Hastings at the Royal Victoria Hotel. And this is an opportunity for people to have just a little bit of time, between 5 and 10, 15 minutes to take the mic and just have their say. And, people don't have to, but what a great opportunity just to say, okay, amongst, people of like mind, friendly, open minds, and to share some of what you've been through. And I'm trying to de-stress the situation or the environment and the scenario in which people can share, because there's a lot of fear around people sharing, as I'm sure you know, and to your cost as well, you know, losing your friend, which is, you know, again, it's like a betrayal of trust, a bereavement. It's a really big issue, this, you know, and it hurts like hell. So the experience of open mic night, I thought, might be a template, and I'm hoping that it, you know, people might pick up this idea and run with it in different countries, and just do these little events and get-togethers where just have a mic and maybe a moderator. I'll be the moderator in my event, and I'm going to do a little presentation myself, 10 or 15 minutes, just to, you know, what's going on around ETN, and then open the floor up to everybody. And I don't know if we'll live stream it on Facebook, because I'll need the permission of the people there, and if people aren't comfortable, then I certainly won't be doing it. But, you know, on the very first event that I ever had, which was, I think May 13th, 2011, the people were not going to speak at all. They had come, and the lady who had the werewolf encounter was there, and so was Simon Parks. In fact, Simon Parks, who's become quite well known now, kicked off the meeting for me. And one of the other guys was a guy called Scott, and he was breaking down in tears because he and his son had encounters. And, you know, he said he wasn't crying through the fear. It was more like a release of, almost a happy release. But he said, you know, he had lost his business, he had lost friends, and he had been concerned he might lose his wife. Although at every point, from the negative, you know, if we're using that terminology, came the positive, this massive change of consciousness that was expansive and certainly changed the person completely, you know, opened up vistas in them that they never, you know, imagined. So, you know, maybe you guys over there can start something like an experience or open mic night, because it's open to people talking about the paranormal and whatever. In fact, Dan's going to come over, and I don't know if he'll be brave enough to take the mic. He's a singer as well, but I guess singing is different from standing in front and owning your story. You know, owning your story is a very, very big deal. And, you know, so I'm going to say hats off and well done to everybody who's come forward to share their story wherever they are in the world and with me. You know, thank you. And because this brings our aggregate consciousness level up. It changes the vibration, the frequency of it. And that means that we are open to more potential and possibilities of developing as a species. And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important too. I really do think it's important that, you know, you find those open lines of communication, that you find those open ways to have dialogue.
Yes.
How do you screen people for telling them or for, you know, making sure their story is accurate?
Well, you know, it's like Bill is a case in point, because I've worked with him extensively. You know, the guy's story never changed. I mean, details were added, and when I say details, it would be like a little memory of a partial detail of the event, rather than, you know, a new event. Except he'll ring me up now and again, Joanne, God, I've had this, because since the download when he was 44. It took him 2 or 3 years and longer for all of the memories, which was, you know, he had this kind of mind dump happen. There's a dump of information, and it went into the back, if you like, the cache memory of his brain. He could only assimilate so much at a time, and over the 20 years or so till now, it was all teased out. It all settled down into conscious awareness clearly. And then a few days ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago now, he rang me to say that he remembers standing on a balcony, and he had a little flat above some shops, so it was just one story up, and having a drink with his wife after a gig, so late in the night, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning perhaps, and about 20 feet away from them is a girl, a teenage girl, they reckon, with longish hair, just staring up at them. And it kind of unnerves Bill a little bit, but he doesn't think anything of it, because he's not at age 44 yet, and he just, doesn't accept anything that's slightly weird even, and he just goes in. His wife's another minute or two, and then she rushes in. She goes, oh my God, I know why it's weird. Look. And she takes him out again, and she goes, she's not on the floor. She's 20 feet off the floor. And she was just hovering there, this girl. Just hovering. So the paranormal is massive in the experiencer arena. It is huge. I mean, Bill's had absolutely tons. But going back to the truthfulness, that guy and I, especially because I wanted to get things down correctly for the story, for the book, and I'm putting my name to it, we would just go over it and over and over. And I'm telling you, the people I speak to who are not hoaxers, and in my opinion, those who've contacted me, I would rate at 90 to 95% genuine, which is huge. And the reason is because the psychology with which they present, they're normally very conscious and very self-conscious about how they're sounding. And they tell me their story. They tell it again, and I go in and ask detail, and they give it straight away. They're not umming and ahhing, and they can reflect on it, and they can come back to it. And, if you're lying, I mean, like Bill said, if I'm lying, Jesus, that's a lot of information to remember exactly as it was, time and time and time again. So it is often, it's like the police interview thing. It's the repetition of the detail. And, if you want to put your name to a whole lot of lies, then you've got to be some kind of sad individual, because it takes a lot of courage and guts to honestly come forward. It really does. And, normally I have had to coax and coach people in and support them afterwards and support them beforehand with a lot of TLC, listening, understanding, and putting them in touch with others. And if you're a hoax, like I've had some hoax calls, they're one-offs. They don't come back. They don't. And so that's been my experience. And also you can feel the heart of people. I can feel the heart of people. And I'm not saying that I couldn't be hoodwinked at any time. Hey, if you want to try, go ahead. But what's the point? These people, and there's a lot of cross-correlation in their story. Not all by any means either, let me say that. But there's quite a lot of patterns and, experiences. The table, the implant, the graves, the this, the that. So many cross-match points. And you can say, well, yeah, people have read the books. Well, yeah, they might have. But you know what? For example, when Bill had his download, the last thing was on his mind was, reading. He was very hard for him. He's not a natural reader. The last thing he wanted to do was to listen to other people's stories. He didn't want to even think about it. He was so coming to terms with what had happened to him. He had no space in his head for anything else. And, he was rebuked and rebuffed by other researchers as well as other people with some experiences, because his abduction experience was, they've been pretty insane. And, like the army stuff, and then you've got the mind control bit thrown in. I mean, you've got the Rosicrucian. You think, what the hell? This is... You couldn't make it up. I mean, you really go. And it's like, just now going at a complete different tangent. So now we're running out of time. The dowsing stuff, this is something that maybe, if you're interested, we'll do at another time. But these dowsing guys I'm working with, we're finding evidence, is what I'm trying to say. Evidence of ET in artifacts. Now, it's not that there's just resonance. There's vibrational frequency or stains, as the archaeologists would say. There's actual objects, art objects from Neanderthal eras that are clearly coming up with configurations from the dowsing side that relate to ET. No doubt about it. There's loads to talk about on that. But what it's showing is that now we have stuff we can hold in our hands that resonates to the Absolutely. ET elements. And this is a first. This is this is now coming to light, and I'll be delighted to share that with you at another time, but very exciting stuff.
Joanna, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight, or good morning to you. It's now almost 8 a.m. your time in the United Kingdom. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you for listening, everybody, and I hope it was interesting, and hopefully we'll hook up again.
Absolutely. Joanne, you hold on for a moment. I got to wrap this thing up. If you're listening in, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, little brother is watching, playing in the background. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Tomorrow night on the program, Lori Williams joins us. We're going to get into the whole idea of remote viewing. How does it work? What is it? And can we really spy on people and things? We'll see you tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. Remember to check out our website, Spaced Out Radio. And to all of you, I want to thank my team. You know who you are. All of you listeners out there for helping share the word, spread the tweets and the posts. That's how we do it. That's how we continue to grow. Because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home. Good night.